This video is now in session, and Trump has finally announced that he will run for president in 2024. So we expected this announcement to come for a very long time. It's been no surprise that Donald Trump is trying to run for re-election, but we are hearing this message in light of a pretty bad election for the Republican Party. Even though the Republicans are going to gain the House, you can see here that right now, Republicans are ahead by 220 seats here, and I think this might be a projection, which would mean that the GOP would have control. But basically, yeah, the Republicans were expected to do a lot better than they actually did. In the Senate, they are not going to get a majority anymore, even with Georgia going to a runoff, and a lot of people are blaming this result on President Trump. And the reason why is because for a lot of these candidates that lost from the Republican side, they were endorsed by Trump over more establishment candidates in the primaries. And because of that endorsement and their candidate quality, Trump has essentially had a lot of Republicans losing potential seats like Washington's 3rd District, where you had Jamie Herrera Butler, who was originally going to win that primary until Trump Republicans endorsed Joe Kent and got him to win the primary instead. And because of that, you had a Democrat win that race. And then in Pennsylvania, you had Trump endorse Amendment Oz when the establishment candidate, David McCormick, was a very strong candidate. And yet, Mehmet Oz won, and he lost the general election. So what does this mean for his primary, and does he actually have a chance of winning in 2024? Those two questions are super complex, but they are the questions that everyone probably wants to know. So let's get started with the primary. The primary, initially we didn't think it was going to be a challenge for Trump, but we did make a video this past summer outlining how this specific exact scenario could happen where Donald Trump's candidates lose the general election and the Republicans start blaming it on him. So it seems like that's happening right now. Whether or not that remains, I don't think it's going to be this strong of an opposition all the way through the primary. But that is also very much dependent on how many people run against him. Because if we remember the 2016 election, Trump didn't actually get a majority in the primary. He got a plurality, and that was because a lot of the establishment vote was spread among several different candidates. Ted Cruz, John Kasich, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, all of these candidates that were trying to get the establishment position. And then meanwhile, you had Trump, who was trying to be the more conservative kind or the more populist kind. And that was a position that no one was going to go against. So now we're in this position here where DeSantis is no doubt the front runner besides Donald Trump. Even with Donald Trump, you could argue that he is the front runner, but if you see here, I mean, Trump's still up 14 percentage points. So I think that Republicans are going to challenge Trump. The establishment is going to present a front with Ron DeSantis. And Ron DeSantis has shown before that he never quits. He's never a quitter, and he always gets what he wants, such as the Florida gubernatorial election. So because of that, I mean, DeSantis does have a good chance, even if you see Trump up by 14 percentage points in this poll. I will say, though, that as of now, Trump does lead against DeSantis just because we haven't seen much of the primary action happen, and Trump is such an effective communicator when it comes to his base, to the point where I think there would be enough Republicans who would be willing to support him in the primary as of now. That could change if DeSantis is able to chip that away, but as of now, I don't have enough evidence to actually make that point. So Trump gets through the primary. Now through the general election. This will be dependent on whether or not a recession does happen. And I don't really care about, we shouldn't really be caring about the definition of a recession as to if we are in a recession. What I mean by a recession is if people are losing jobs. That's what it ultimately comes down to. If people are losing jobs, that will make the difference when it comes to this election. Because if people lose jobs, that means they don't have money for the table, for food on the table. And that will cause many people to change votes, regardless of how negatively they think of Donald Trump. They just want to have some cash flow in order to make sure that they can actually sustain as an American household. So, because of that, if a recession does happen, I expect this race, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, well, yeah, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and maybe Michigan. Michigan might be the sole outlier here, but pretty much every single one of these states to go for Donald Trump, simply because he can make an effective argument that's based on how Democrats have ruined people's money, how they have increased inflation, which has increased pain on the American public, and then how that led to a recession, which is even more pain considering that now they no longer have jobs, which gives them money for their kids, at least for moderate suburbanites. Now, if a recession doesn't happen, but if we still have high inflation, I think that in the end it will be a very close election, but it will end up like 2022, or even 2020, where it was a close race between Donald Trump and Biden, and I think it might actually be even closer than it was in 2020, considering that you have Wisconsin right now. Really underwater in terms of Biden's approval ratings, and in terms of growth for the Democratic Party there. They've already captured so much votes from their voter bases in Milwaukee and Madison to the point where it's very hard to expand on those margins. So because of that, I think that state is going to go Republican, no matter what as of now. So this is what I think it would look like. It would be very close, 287 to 251. Literally, if you flip Pennsylvania, that would give the Republicans, that would give Donald Trump the majority. So that is what happens if inflation still persists, but if there's nothing worse than this current condition right now. And then finally, you have the third option, which is that inflation reduces and people start to go back to normal. The Fed is able to make a land in. It might be a little bit shaky, but it's not. It doesn't result in such a large recession. And in the end, Americans actually are back to normal by the 2024 election. This situation is not super probable right now, as much as we all want to think this situation could happen because we want to get out of this time period. For this kind of thing to subside, at least fully, it's going to take a while, considering that inflation rates have been stubbornly high at above 6%, when it usually, I think it should be either 2 or 4%. Should be 2% per year. So yeah, the Fed and the Fed and America still has a long way to go. So I don't think this will happen. But if it does happen, then I would consider putting North Carolina as blue and Nevada as blue, just simply because at that point, it's like Obama's re-election campaign in 2012. At that time, the economy was still recovering, and a lot of people were a lot of Democrats were scared that Obama was actually going to get succeeded by Romney, simply because Americans couldn't start to feel growth in the economy, as Obama took a long time for all of that to occur. But in the end, he was able to paint Romney as this elitist who was not going to help Americans. And Biden in this situation can paint Donald Trump in situation 2, or this situation, as a narcissist who does nothing good, who is not doing anything good for the American public right now, and doesn't deserve to be in the White House anymore, considering his behavior. So that's the situations I can think of in terms of the primaries and in terms of the elections. For the primaries, it's dependent on how many people run against him, and then also the savviness of Ron DeSantis. For the presidential election, it just comes down to the economy. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.